Welcome to the Mad Men Happy Hour, the officially unofficial podcast for Mad Men on AMC. I'm Jim.
I'm Aaron.
And today we're talking about Season 7, Episode 13, titled The Milk and Honey Route.
Root.
Are you gonna correct my grammar like Don?
Damn straight I am.
It's more pronunciation correction, but okay. What do you think of this episode?
I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
You loved it. Okay. I think you're not in the minority there. A lot of people liking this episode.
In fact, I think the next episode can kind of just fuck around and idle with what they've kind of unveiled here, and I'm halfway to being satisfied. Like it would have to be a truly terrible thing next episode for me to. I don't know. I just love this episode. I did not see the Betty thing coming out of this plot. I was not expecting Don's road trip to be so poignant.
Okay.
And
yeah, I'm mostly with you. I don't know. I've watched it a couple times now, and the first time I wasn't like, I didn't really get what was going on so much. It felt just like a very straightforward thing, and yeah, there was some emotion in it with Betty's predicament. But yeah, I think second watch is better. There's a lot going on here.
And I think the other thing is that Pete. I think this could be a false redemption, but it was nice to see, and I would never have thought that two characters I kind of loathe, Betty and Pete, that I would have this positive a feeling about them in the penultimate episode.
Yeah, I'm still not sure how I feel about Pete and Trudy getting back together.
I think you'd be a fool to unreservedly think that's a good idea.
Certainly,
and the stakes are incredibly high.
Being a fool is kind of the problem I have with it. I'm not certain that Pete is a changed man, and yet Trudy seems to be. So, like,
I think he thinks he's a changed man.
Yeah, I kind of want Trudy to not believe that because of how horrible he was to her so long ago. And
sure,
maybe he has changed, maybe he's not. I just would like Trudy to be a little more skeptical, but
I love Trudy. I want Trudy to be happy. I hope he is making change. I think there's some compelling evidence that says that he is going to be the one that escapes the Draper orbital trajectory and safely lands in Wichita. But I would say we'll see, except for we probably won't.
Yeah.
In fact,
I think this was the swan song for several characters.
The only thing that I'm a little bit is a little sour to me is thinking that maybe last episode was Peggy's finale.
I think so,
because I don't see there any room for her in the last hour of this television show.
Frankly, I don't see room for anyone but Dawn.
I feel like it's going to be all about Dawn, maybe some Sally in there, maybe some Betty in there.
Ooh. Although yeah, I don't even see Betty coming back, honestly.
But I
think if there's any other character besides Dawn that we're familiar with, it's Sally.
And maybe I don't even need to see Sally, because I thought, Although, come on, he's going to call Sally because he said he would. I'll call you in a week.
Okay.
And where it's about 6 days exactly from his next check-in. So I feel like that unless the next episode is the day, like him just hoboing around for a day, and at the end of the day he calls Sally and it's a crane shot zooming out from a telephone booth or something, I don't know how he avoids, because that's the one thing that Don can do to kind of be lost in my eyes. Or maybe that's the point, that he just forgets to call his kids while they're going through this crisis. He goes on I don't know, there's a lot of things that can work, but I feel very confident that this is going to be emotionally rewarding, because this last hour was incredible.
I agree. On almost all fronts. Like I said, I'm a little skeptical on Trudy, but everything else, man.
And that's the thing. I'm confident that we're never going to know about Trudy and Pete.
Yeah. I don't think you need to. I think that question has the right to be asked, but ultimately the answer is not necessarily what the show cares about.
No, it's answer unclear.
Yeah. Anyway, who made this episode?
This episode is written and directed by Matthew Weiner, and he was joined as a co-writer by Carly Ray, who has got a long and extensive experience writing for Mad Men. She also wrote Lost Horizon last episode, The Forecast. As a staff writer. Her sole writing credits include the Monolith, your favorite one from last season, The Strategy, So she also wrote in one episode of the Constantine television series, but it seems like she's just a creature of the Wienerverse.
Okay, sounds good. And directed by Matt Weiner, you said?
Directed by Matthew Weiner. I believe we talked about this Carly before. The helping him out on it was Simichelis' last episode of the Lost Horizon. That I think that it's nice that the Weiner has a woman on to help him write stuff that's so heavily reliant on Betty and Trudy's experience here.
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's get into the recap. We start off with Don driving down the road. He gets pulled over, and the cops tell him they've been looking for him.
Yeah.
And that we knew we'd catch up with you eventually. And then Don wakes up in a motel.
Sure.
The classic Don nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
This time about his past and what he's done. And, there's a lot of stuff in this episode about that, which we'll get to.
In his dream sequence, he's listening to Merle Haggard's classic Okie from Muskogee, and he's extolling how in Main Street and the heartland of America, we don't smoke marijuana, we don't do LSD, we don't burn our draft cards, and it's like painting this stereotypically wholesome view of Main Street America, the real America,
Sure.
if you will.
Yeah.
Where we live.
Middle
We're
America.
real Americans, sure. But then the whole rest of the episode is essentially this small town running train on Don Draper, one con after another. And that they've got this, there's the burlesque dancer at the fundraiser at the American Legion.
They definitely booze it up, that's for sure.
Do you think the Wiener is trying to tell us that, there's a false dichotomy that, like, Pete saying New York's a toilet, this is kind of like a less classier toilet?
Yeah.
Like New York is the Trump Tower of toilets, and this is like the Portalette of toilets.
That things are really
You still
kind
got
of the
strippers
same everywhere.
They're not as attractive. You still got liars and hypocrites and con artists. They're just less better dressed, and they hit you with phone books instead of buying your company out.
Yeah, sure. I like that.
And if that's what he's saying, then Pete's clinging to Wichita as his perfect destination, his paradise,
The thing where he can kind of get away
his
from
Shangri-La.
Yeah.
That to me, that's starting to maybe say that it's evidence that the Wiener thinks that this is maybe more of a mirage.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Sure. That's where I naturally lean, just because I don't believe totally that Pete's changed, but I don't know. There's a lot of stuff in here that we can talk about. The one thing that I don't like in the reading of this thing where the cop comes up and says, you knew we'd catch up to you eventually.
Yeah.
I don't like a literal reading of that. I don't like the idea that in the last episode, Don is somehow going to get caught for the stuff he did in Korea.
They flirt with that tension the entire episode, though.
They do. I don't like that read literally, though. I don't feel like that's a good, satisfying ending to this series. If Don has to pay for his mistakes by going to prison,
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not willing to write off any story possibility, but I think I'm with you that this reads better as this is just something this is something that Don has lived with his entire life.
And something that
This fear.
Yeah, something that's going to catch up to him and he'll have to deal with. Not in a literal way, but in a figurative, like within himself, he'll have to deal with this stuff.
Sure.
And I feel like that's what's happening in this episode.
Well,
Is him dealing with it.
there is a lot of chickens come home to roost. I mean,
Yeah.
we started this series watching Don Draper heroically save the cigarette industry from the scare of lung cancer.
That's a good point.
Since then, he's lost Anna Draper. He's lost Rachel. He's losing Betty.
Yep.
Why he himself is, seems to be as healthy as the day is long. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That things are
there's some
catching up with him,
serious
but
chickens.
he's not really paying the price.
Mhm.
I mean, he paid, Megan $1 million and he gives away his caddy, and
He's got no apartment. Like all of that is being stripped away. Sure.
yeah. And that's
but I get what you're saying.
Tom
That's-
Lorenzo made a great point about him. This as we have feedback to attest to, this title of this episode is, a book about being a hobo, like a guide to being a hobo and doing it the good life. And in this episode, Don becomes a hobo.
Yep.
He has no job. He has no ties to home.
He has no home, no car.
He has no car. He has a clothes on his back and a Sears paper bag.
And a fat bank account. Let's not forget
That's
that.
true.
I mean, at
That's
any
true.
time he rolls up to the precursor of the ATM, I
Ri-
guess the bank.
Riding the rails with, you know, a fat. Although, are we sure that he still has a fat bank?
I'm
Because
pretty sure.
he has a lot. I mean, I believe what he says, that he had a lot of his money tied up in McCann, and he gave away Megan $1 million.
But
He doesn't
was
have a
millionaire.
salary
So he was a
anymore.
millionaire before he met Megan, right?
Sure.
He was making a salary that whole time. Do you think he was living so far beyond his means that $1 million bankrupts him at that point? And even if it does, he got paid out a couple of million from McCann from the deal, just like
Up front,
just
you
like
think?
Joan, just like Pete, just yeah.
Well, they got a
everybody
little bit of that. They got like 1/5. Yeah, I mean,
They got
it's
half of it. So he's got a couple $1 million regardless.
It seems interesting that he's sweating Sally for lacrosse money.
I think he's trying to teach her something.
That could
I
be.
don't think he's trying to say, "Hey, I'm low on money, so
Yeah, no, you're right.
The Spain trip is going to bankrupt
I
me."
think ultimately you're correct, but there's a little bit of ambiguity there
Okay,
because we don't really know how much money Don went
It's
from
true.
giving away $5,000 to his brother being somewhat painful to at some point he's just mega rich.
Yeah.
You know, somewhere around
He also sold his apartment. I
The
know that was like
SCDP and-
70,000. Is that what they
Sure.
said? 75 grand
and how much money do you really
Yeah.
need to live like a life of
to
luxury?
live a
And-
life of a hobo?
Yeah, well, true.
Not much.
That's true.
Not much. Anyway, so let's talk about that scene for a little bit. They're talking on the phone, Don and Sally, and oh no, wait, sorry, I skipped the Pete scene.
Yes.
Pete's putting toothpaste on a bee sting.
Sure.
All right, why not?
It's
What's the point of that?
I don't know. It's like almost a homeopathic remedy. Like baking
what-
soda draws the poison out. Toothpaste is like baking soda. It might contain
Yeah.
at the time, you know, well, I mean, they put baking soda back in toothpaste as like a, you know, whitening
Okay.
agent or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So maybe it's like treating like with like.
I think this makes sense in Pete's head
It does
more than anywhere else.
it does. But you know, a lot of Pete's head is being beat by the sun nowadays because that hairline.
Oh,
I saw a receipt just from episode 712 to here.
Uh-huh.
Like that part is a savage gash in his scalp
I love it.
and just a fountain of hair trying desperately to cover too much skin. It's a thing of beauty.
It really is. So yeah, Trudy comes home and sees what he's doing, and he promptly leaves. And then afterward, Trudy and her friend are talking about how great she is for not telling her daughter bad things about Pete, essentially. And I think that's because she doesn't totally believe the bad things about Pete. You know, she still loves him. I mean, yeah, he's done some bad things, but ultimately she still loves the guy. And I also buy her reasoning that she doesn't want to poison her daughter
Yeah.
against him because that doesn't help the daughter at all.
No, I mean Trudy's a hell of a woman.
Yeah.
And I expect nothing less from her. But then again, like a lot of people be vindictive and use their kids in this manner, and it's gross.
I kind of felt like at the end, when she set her friend straight, she holds up the apples. It was kind of like a "how about them apples" sort of thing.
Plus, I think that she's just getting tired of being, you know, in the early 70s, a woman that's divorced and raising a kid on her own is still a thing of astonishment. And
Okay.
you know, pitiful, you know, that poor pitiful person. And the housewives are being condescending to her and pitying her, and the house husbands are hitting on her
Mhm.
and making her feel uncomfortable. She's just, you start to see why going back to Pete would be appealing to her. I can't believe I just choked those words out.
Okay. Yep.
Because
Shame on you,
again,
but
Trudy
Yeah.
is a hell of a woman. And I
Mhm.
just remember like 2 seasons ago, Dawn tried to tell Pete that, like,
Yeah.
you're fucking up, kid. And trying to give him the advice that Pete gave to his brother, like, you know, it's fun until it's
Mhm.
not fun anymore. And I thought that was I don't know. A lot of Pete's change seems not out of the blue and as like it's something that he's finally put together.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, maybe Bert tap danced his way in his socked feet into Pete's dreams too and told him the best things in life are free because he's got the new time religion. I like what he's preaching.
Yeah, I feel like maybe his experience with the real estate agent in California didn't help him, or I'm sorry, did help him come to this realization.
Why is that?
Because that was just another failed relationship that he's got that he thought was great until it wasn't.
Right. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, she didn't get him, but then he didn't really get her or respect her either. So
yeah, it's weird because it kind of felt like they did at the beginning.
Yeah,
they were both very ambitious. They both.
But it was all surface stuff.
Yeah.
And will he do better a second time with Trudy? I don't know.
We'll see.
Well, we won't.
We might see. We have an hour to see. Dawn and Sally talk on the phone about her backing out of field hockey, and Dawn has already bought her equipment, and then about a trip to Spain. Dawn's just basically staying in touch with Sally here, keeping up on her life while he's on the road. It's
good. It's a nice scene. And calling your kid once a week is a little rough, but hell, for the time, maybe that's admirable. And I do like the fact that I know she said it somewhat ironically. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm sitting right next to you, but it was kind of cool that it's different from the times he's run away before because he's actually still staying present in his kid's life. Mm-hmm. Now, if next week he misses that phone call, because you can imagine that Sally's like desperate, like, Jesus Christ, why didn't you leave me the hotel you were staying with? Or why don't I have any way to take, to get a hold of you? But it's working right now, and it seems pretty heartwarming.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, I'm not sure if they're going to do anything with that in the next episode, but even if they don't, I feel like they left it in a hopeful place. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we go to Betty, who is at school. She's going up the stairs, and she seems very out of breath, and she falls over and she hurts herself.
I want to say that this came out of nowhere, but they've actually built a kind of foundation for this with her talking about being tired, and she said that she confided to Don that she's starting to feel. He said, age. So you're just getting old, but tired and having trouble with the hoofing the books across campus. So, and this stuff also, aggressive cancer like that just kind of hits you all of a sudden too.
Sure. Yeah. Not much else in that scene. So Let's keep going. Pete runs into Duck Phillips in the McCann elevator. Duck follows him into his office and tells Pete that he wants him to go to Lear Jets and recommend that they hire an in-house marketing manager so Duck can find one and get the commission. Mm-hmm. And Pete agrees to do it.
Yeah. I thought there's a lot of interesting things in this episode. First of all, it looks like Pete swooped in and saved all of Joan's old accounts. And
it seems like it.
We know the last scene you saw of Joan is her grabbing a Rolodex and leaving. We had a couple people that missed the deadline last week saying, aha, that's significant. It's McCann Erickson's really going to sweat those accounts.
Not so much. Some of them probably, but.
Well, I mean, the big ones, not at all. And you wonder, do you think that Pete and Joan had an arrangement behind the closed doors where maybe somehow Joan's going to get a little bit of Pete's bonus money? Or do you think that Pete's just a grimy little pimp?
I think Pete, grimed his way in there.
All right.
Although he claims that he got Burger Chef back. I'm not certain about that. I think it was probably Harry's promise to switch from White Castle to Burger Chef.
Wasn't Burger Chef's Peggy's account too? Because that's the other thing is...
I thought it was, yeah.
He didn't say anything about Peggy. I guess if Peggy was gone, he would mentioned it, but because that's a Duck Phillips connection and all that. Although I don't know if he knows that... I can't remember if he knows that Duck and Peggy were romantically attached at one point.
I don't know. I'm not sure if he's aware of that, but that's scary.
Drunken dog abandoning asshole. And he seems manic. Like...
He does, yeah.
On first watch, it seems like he's kind of confident and he's a consummate salesman and all that. But when you watch this the second time, you realize just how truly lost and desperate he is and how much he's heavily drinking and drunk throughout the entire episode. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, why do you think that is? Duck's just being Duck?
Man, Duck
he's just being kind of a half-ass.
He seems like a vindictive, self-destructive, like he's kind of a Don in the way that he's able to accurately diagnose people. Like, he's told Pete last season or last half season, if you got to shore up your family, you got to shore up your home life and all this stuff. But, he's the guy that abandoned his wife and kids. He abandoned his dog in a big city. Yeah. He shits on Roger Sterling's desk. He, kind of takes advantage and uses Peggy. I don't know. He's more of an eternal Don Draper to me.
All right.
Or failed Don Draper, less successful version.
I do like this globe that opens up into a bar. I think the studio needs one of those.
Once upon a time we played a game of Sky Mall Bingo. and I do believe you wrested the globe from me.
I think
That
so,
was
yeah.
my grand strategy is to get that, and you beat me. You beat me like a drum.
I got lucky; it was on my page, my first pick page. Anyway, there's also a mention of a donation to Lincoln Center, which I think is kind of a jab at Duck here. How he's kind of desperately asking for money from
he's
Pete,
essentially asking
basically.
for charity at the end.
Yeah, he is. Like, please help me out. Look, I need this money to get me through the winter.
Winter's
That sort
coming,
of thing.
Pete.
I need my booze. Then Don's car breaks down while he's on the road. Nothing much to that, so I'm going to keep going.
Yep.
At the hospital, Betty's doctor asks her to get Henry to come down because there's some very serious matters to discuss about her health. Then we cut to them leaving the hospital, and Henry says, I'm going to sue them or call someone or something. Henry's very angry, and he wants to do something.
You skipped a lot of stuff there, but
No, like what?
well, no, I guess you're right. It does make
It does a
awkward
weird
jump. My
smash cut,
fault.
yeah.
No, I thought it was interesting that this was kind of a callback to the early season with Don directly dealing with Betty's counselor.
Okay.
You know, that like 10 years later, and the doctor has mortal news to tell her.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, you need to get your husband down here. So like, and he's explaining all this to Henry, and
It's
Betty is
the
just sitting
times,
in the
sure.
foreground. Yeah, it's
That's how it was done back then.
I just thought that was an interesting callback that she's still, you know, in a matter of her life and death, it's more the husband is seen as the guy who can deal with all this and needs to be here. And, you know, shit, what if she was single?
Yeah, and it looks like by the end of this,
They get a priest in there to,
they
you
do.
know, you need a man to explain.
Yeah, they
you
just
need
have a stand-in male.
I need
to
a
come in
man to
there.
explain this so he can
Uh-huh.
explain it to you, sweetheart.
Yes.
Find me a man.
I forget what I was gonna say. Anyway, Betty tries to smoke in this scene, and
Yeah.
he crumples up the cigarettes. I like that.
Sure.
It shows
That's a rational reaction.
from Henry. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
Like it's like you can almost say it's a dick, but in the circumstances, nah.
Yeah, it's a weird. Like they both kind of have rational reactions in some way, right?
No,
I mean,
yeah.
Betty understands like this is my time. I've learned to trust people when they say it's over. She seems somewhat at peace with it. She's grown so much since early seasons Betty, when you know there's a cancer scare way back in the day.
Sure.
And Henry has a similar reaction, an opposite but similarly rational reaction, which
Sure.
is to be angry and defiant and try to resist it.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, that's all. I mean, this is like season 1 Breaking Bad stuff too. Like, what do you do? And it can't,
Sure.
you know, you have a family member that wants to give up, and the other, and you know, I've unfortunately had a lot of experience with cancer in my life and my family, and friends of mine, and I don't know what you do if like doctor says, well, you got 6 months to a year. And there's a 10% chance with aggressive chemo that could be 2 to 3 years.
I say you party. You go out partying.
I know, because that's the thing. Like
You get your ducks in a row and then you go out partying.
I remember my friend's grandfather took the 2 to 3 year gamble, and he's like on his deathbed. It's like, I would never, because you know he went through 6 months of hell with chemo,
Yeah.
and it just didn't work.
No, it's bad. But then, I
And-
mean, you have some cases where it does work, you know.
That's what I'm saying.
and it
It's
goes
all
into
about the
remission and you
percentages.
get a lot
and
more
all.
time,
It's all about that. But man, with
That was my grandma's case. Is she got a
Sure.
lot more time from chemo,
sure.
a year's worth.
Yeah. So it's all, you know, it's all about your individual diagnosis. But man, I don't think any reaction, the whole, like, you know, I think that society has this expectation that you have to fight. You can't give up. You got to get a positive attitude. But
Sure.
I don't know. It's an irrational thing to say, you know what? I'll take my 6 to 9 months of relative good health and then, you know, end this as quick as possible rather than fight it tooth and nail. I'm not saying either one's correct. I just think that it felt very real.
Yeah, I feel, I don't know.
And again, I came in this episode kind of more or less hating Betty. Yes.
Still hating Betty to
I
the
came
core.
into this episode and like, yes, she's learning psychology. It's all well and good. And she seems like but I still don't like her as a character. And I don't like January Jones as an actress. And I did a 180-degree turn. It's same thing with Pete. Like, I feel much more affectionate towards those characters than I did an episode ago. And that's pretty remarkable.
Okay. Shows you the power of good storytelling, huh?
Power of the wiener.
Yes. Don gets a ride to a motel where he meets the owners. He books a room and he gets a vending machine meal. The worst kind of meal possible.
And again, from the beginning, this whole small town experience feels like a shakedown. Like they're kind of making jokes about
The car's gonna be in there for a while.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a room.
yeah, you're gonna need to. And Don's like, hey, I know my stuff, and he's like, oh, and yeah, there's like, oh well,
Huh.
we'll give you some roast beef room service, like the down home charm.
Yeah.
But the whole setup of like, who knows how long this thing will be in his shop? You could be here for day. I just feels like the setup, man.
It didn't just feel like some folksy people talking
No.
about talking some real talk. It just
No.
felt like grifters.
It felt
Grifters
more like
grifting.
Carney than it
Okay.
felt more like down home.
Yeah,
wholesome.
I think I'm with you. There's something just not right about the
There's
whole
some shenanigans.
setup. Anyway, we go to Pete's dinner meeting with Learjet's guy. I don't know his name. They say it, but I forgot it. He discovers that Duck has tricked him into a job interview.
Tricked them
Whoops.
both.
Yeah. The Lear guy thought that Pete was there for a job interview.
You know, the funny thing about the Duck Phillips situation is how progressively Pete panics about it, because like Duck is an asshole.
Yep.
Like he is gambling with this man's life with no certain expectation for an outcome, and completely without Pete's permission. Like this is fine. I mean, this is scummy, but it's fine. But later on, when you find out he's talked to Jim Hobarth about the situation, which maybe that's a lie too. But if true, my God, he is playing with this man's career.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to decipher is the lie from the truth here. Like he's lying so much about this job interview and all that. And most of the lies seem to be going, at least after Pete figures it out, going toward the Lear guy. Was Duck even in the building for a meeting with Jim in the first place?
That's
like on that elevator ride up.
Man, I had that in my notes
actually
to ask that, or if this is a con, like is this a parallel structure that Don Draper with Pete Gamble? Because yes, you can read Duck as scamming Pete from the first moment. He's not there.
Like he rides that elevator up, he rides it right back down after he's talked to Pete, or he's been riding that elevator for an hour, waiting for Pete to get into the office.
Yeah, he's rides and waits for Pete to show up.
Oh, Pete!
Right.
I'm glad I ran into you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more likely.
It's all possible. Let's put it that way. It's all possible.
Sure. Betty's back at the hospital. She's looking at x-rays and they're explaining how serious this cancer is and the fact that she only has about 9 months to a year left to live. And Henry is very angry about that. And Betty is, I don't think, in shock. Henry describes it later on as shock. I don't think she's in shock. I think she's coming to terms with the end of her life.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of on her own terms. I don't think that she's got this blank stare because there's nothing going on upstairs.
And this is everything that happens in this episode is consistent with what I understand to be her character. And I was surprised to find that out as anybody. That of course Betty Francis has got this constitution, this construction to take a hopeless situation with grace and class. And again, you know, like you said, it's on her terms, and a lot of her instructions to Sally was wrapped up in we're concerned about her looks and all that stuff. But you know, the toughness and the kind of like standoffishness she had with her kids, and you know, the various relationships she's in, and how cold she is, was a huge benefit in you know, dying young and helping your daughter come to grips with that. It's all.
Man, I'm not sure I'm following you. It was,
what do you mean?
What was a benefit?
Her like being this ice queen has the side effect of her being very strong and emotionally present for her daughter, and to help her deal with this.
So you're saying when she does crack and tell Sally in the letter "I love you," that it's more emotionally resonant because it's not something she would typically do?
That's part of it, but also like if Betty were not this tough and steely, she would fall apart and be a lot more, you know, not to make a pun on last episode's her studies, but hysterical.
Okay. All right.
So it's like
I see that. So she's setting an example.
These weaknesses and her being unable to connect with her children and all that has been kind of a blessing because, you know, she's got this level of detachment that she can, you know, look at her life and say, you know, I've had a pretty good run and it's going to be over and you're going to be fine because you've already been fine. And with no help from me or your father, you're going to, you know, I think there's a lot of that coming through there.
Okay.
that a lot of her personality flaws turns into strength in a life or death situation.
All right, sure, I buy that. We go to Don, who is in bed reading The Godfather, when the maid comes in with a message that his car is going to take a while to fix. And he gives the maid some money and asks him to get a bottle of booze for him.
Sure.
Because it's... So when he says it's going to be tough, he thinks he can rustle up something. He's just talking about booze not being available within the vicinity, right? It's not like a dry county or anything.
I have no idea about Oklahoma.
It felt to me, because he says later on that he had to walk into town to get it.
Oh.
And I think maybe it's just a journey to get to where the booze is.
That's fine. I mean, if it's a dry county, I don't think you're going to walk across a county. This isn't Forrest Gump. He's not going to run across Greenbow to get himself a bottle.
No. And then if you said that it was dry county, you'd have to say, okay, well, these guys of the Legion are just flouting the law completely.
Yeah, maybe they do.
They're scofflaws.
They are.
Don certainly is.
They got their bottles of booze and their corn-fed strippers, and it's the way they like it.
Yeah. So this guy's name is Andy. Not much here. Looks like it's out of the ordinary with Andy in this scene. He's
just like a go-getter, a little bit of a golden age Nucky Thompson.
Sure. He needs to. When Nucky was his age, he was probably a lot better off. Had a higher position, that's for sure. Anyway, Don goes to the pool. He spots a good-looking woman sunbathing, and her family shows up, and then Don dives into the pool. There's a book on this woman's lap called The Woman of Rome. And it is about intersecting lives of many characters, chief among them a prostitute, whose mother is also a prostitute, and an idealist. Comes
from a long line of prostitutes.
Yeah, not unlike one of the other characters in this show. An idealistic intellectual who, after an interrogation during which he betrays his colleagues, becomes completely disillusioned about everything. A lot of similarities to Don here.
Yeah, and also something that Tom and Lorenzo pointed out in their review is that this also could be a kind of Ghost of Betty situation, because the last time they were genuinely happy was in their trip to Italy. And, there was a similar scene where Don was able to like come upon her and see her as like a beautiful woman for the first time again. So this woman of Rome striking, and he has this moment, and then real life comes in and her husband and kids, and he's like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to don it up here.
I don't typically like the AV Club's takes on Mad Men.
I agree.
I almost never agree with them.
It's not like they're superficial or stupid, but there's something that just doesn't connect with me the way like the Lamberts and Tom and Lorenzos and Sepinwalls do.
They do have uninteresting commentary on this book and several other points in the episode about European escapism. And one of those things is, this book is The Woman of Rome. And we know about the trip to Italy that he and Betty took.
Yep.
That was a very like renewing escapism moment. Also in this episode, Don's talking about a trip to Spain for his daughter and how he would like to go to Spain. There's a mention in the Legion with these vets who were talking about like, I didn't break the 10 Commandments until I got to Europe. There's a lot of mentions of Europe and escaping, and I don't know what it means, and they don't say what it means either.
Right.
But I think there is a theme there. I don't know if maybe Don needs to escape the country to finally escape, his old life, or what, if he's going to try to escape to another land. That I suppose could be interesting, but there's something there, and I'm trying to chew that a little bit and figure out what it is.
I don't know. I think they're overreaching.
You think so?
I think that you can stop there with the analysis of being this is kind of the ghost of Betty or something that makes him kind of like think of Betty.
Okay.
And very not, because obviously she doesn't really look like anything like Betty, except for she's very elegant and, beautiful. But that's where I think that's as deep as the analysis goes, because you're again, like this European, it's an easily testable theory. If Don doesn't go to Europe and there's no other mention of it, then it's just Dante's Inferno, only more desperate and grasping. So
what do you make of Don's day being ruined here by her family showing up?
Is it ruined?
Well, I mean,
his moment
is broken, right? Like this family comes rushing in, and all of a sudden he's shaken out of his daze, and he jumps in the pool. It felt to me like maybe, going along with kind of the Don likes the beginning of things. It's when things get complicated, when you get family involved, when you get all these other this
Yeah,
kind of
I can
baggage
see that. I can see
attached
that.
around a woman, he no longer is interested.
I can see that visual statement being made. Sure.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about in that scene?
Nope.
Okay. Then Duck calls Pete and he tells him, you need to go to another dinner with Lear after you've already figured out this is a ruse. Pete doesn't want to because he's got a lot at stake here. He's got 4 years left on a contract for $1 million.
Yeah.
But Duck is not really taking no for an answer. And he kind of gets a non-answer here, which Duck implies a yes from. But I don't know.
I don't think he implies it. I think there's no way to say no to Doug, or Duck at this point. He seemed hell bent. Pete is going to be his bread and butter.
Yeah.
And
one way or another.
Either Pete is destroyed or he eats. There is no alternative. This is the fucking Hunger Games, man.
Jesus. Yeah.
He is Katniss Everdeen.
Yeah. And Pete isn't really that cold calculating guy, right? He never has been.
Pete doesn't scheme well.
No.
When Pete schemes, it ends badly for him.
Yeah.
He's better work. He can be sleazy and pimpy.
Oh yeah.
And grimy, and he can be earnest. Those are his two speeds. Calculating, not really.
And he can be charming. Occasionally, Pete is charming.
He can be a version of charming, sure.
Like, I feel like in his meetings with clients, like that's where he shines. It's certainly a grimy version of him, but
I think that's sycophant, which goes well in boardrooms. But
yeah,
sure. I don't know if it's charming.
Charming to those people, but maybe not to the general populace. Sure.
Yeah, there's got to be a word for that. It's like, it's not charming in the sense that like Don or Roger is, but it's just like an eager to please. I don't know. Like he's your golf caddy. He'll get anything, do anything, and make you feel like $1 million while he's doing it.
Yeah, but he doesn't feel like a Mathis, and Mathis is just much less graceful about it.
Well, sure.
Whereas Pete is like, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, and I'm going to give you what you want.
Wasn't it Lane Price that said, though, the difference in him and Ken were that, you take care and make sure the client's needs and concerns are addressed, and Ken makes them feel like they don't have needs or concerns at all.
Huh, okay.
Like, that's the difference. Like, Ken is charming. Pete is grimy.
He's attentive.
Yeah, it's something, but no, like he's just something so damn artificial about it.
Yeah,
it's almost robotic. Like I am saying this combination of words that I've heard someone else say,
that I've probably seen Don say before.
Yeah, or maybe it's his dad, because the other bombshell. Forget the cancer. Forget the reunion. The fact that the Campbells are ladies' men.
Yeah, Bud doesn't look like a ladies' man.
They don't have a 300-year history of blood and deception and treachery. They have a 300-year history of bush hunting. I was like, for fucking real?
Apparently so.
I always assumed that was because Pete had a big job and lots of money.
Yeah,
but apparently they're bushmasters, man.
I guess so. I wouldn't have guessed. Anyway, Henry has a couple contacts.
It's like Henry Kissinger.
Okay.
Man,
sure, yeah.
Man is a human troll, but by all accounts, he was a ladies' man.
Plowing. Non-stop plowing.
He was, yes. He's like supernaturally charming and magnetic. That's hard to believe, but there you go.
Indeed. So Henry has a couple, not Kissinger. Henry Francis has a couple of contacts for oncologists and is pushing Betty to do something about her cancer, but she is really resistant. She doesn't want to do anything, and she has her children on her mind. This is the bathroom scene.
Sure.
People remember that. I don't know. I mean, this is just, furthering the idea that they're kind of opposed in their views. And she finally spells out to Henry a little bit why she's feeling the way she is.
And, Henry, like he says, you're a lucky woman. You always have been. Well, he's been a very in control man.
Oh,
who has gotten the things he expects, he expects to make phone calls and people snap to attention. And this is the one thing, like, when he said, what do you think if Rockefeller would do? And she's like, he'd die, asshole.
Yeah.
This is, you can fight City Hall, but you can't fight city cancer. It's the worst.
Sure. Mother Nature. She's a bitch.
She is.
The maid shows up with booze and swindles Don out of another $10. They discuss how Don got rich, and then the maid takes off. This is the grammar Nazi scene here, where he corrects him from no more to anymore.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that? I mean,
don't know.
obviously Don is trying to help this kid. He sees him going along a dangerous path. I feel like he maybe sees a little bit of himself in this.
Well, Don is
kid.
a con man.
Yeah. And he wants to kind of steer him away from making some big mistakes.
Some obvious mistakes. I mean, this has the feeling of like Tywin Lannister lecturing Arya about you should say my lord instead of my lord, because if you're trying to pass yourself off as a poor person, well, this is the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to be this slick guy, but you're talking like street rat.
Mm-hmm.
You need to rate, like I'm trying to, tell you how obvious you're being in a as non-confrontational way as I possibly can.
Yeah. Then Pete and Trudy put Tammy to bed, and in a really short scene, Pete looks back longingly at the door as he leaves. We can see the wheels start to turn in Pete's head. Maybe I can grind my way back into this situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hate to say it's just all grime, because I think there is some element of sweetness to this,
I agree, but
like,
it's so much more fun to think of it.
That's the thing,
as
like
little Pete.
I don't know. I'm not a cheater. I find it's interesting to me that Pete, married to Trudy, got so much satisfaction by being the god king of prostitutes. And had to pressure au pairs and having sex with him, and just I
feel like he's emulating what he's seen.
I get it, yeah, and this makes sense. Like, it doesn't make sense that the Campbells are these lady man, but okay, apparently they are. And then
he just sees Don and Roger and thinks that's what he needs to be.
I get it. And that's a hard lesson to learn, because he was so young and he had the example from his father, and then he goes into workplace and like, well, shit, my dad wasn't anything special. These guys are all doing this, and he just went along with it. But I think now he's older and he's wiser, and he's like, that stuff is, it's just one thing. It's all the same. It's like, I can't remember who I was reading. It's like a rock star or something, and he was explaining about why he settled down. Of course, he probably got divorced 6 months later, but he's like, being with a different woman every night it seems like it's like all this variety, but you're having the same experience over and over and over again. You don't get into any nuance or
not being able to get it up because he did too much coke,
being a bitter, crushing disappointment, and throwing her out of the hotel room at 2 o'clock in the morning. But you only get complexity and new and rich experiences in like a relationship kind of context.
Okay.
You can debate that point back and forth, but
yeah.
I do think that like Pete was burnt out and like tired of all that, and saw that that's like, that's one of the things where everything that glitters is not gold.
Does it have anything to do with him coming back to New York? He's called the city of Pitt. He seemed to enjoy it much more in California. I felt like when he came back, he wasn't as interested in that.
Well, and he even said himself that I thought California was this rewarding experience, but now that I'm back, I'm like, that was, a fantasy or whatever. So I don't know. There's something. It is weird that Meghan made the same comment, or Meghan's sister, that the city's poisoned people, or it's about this grimy city. So it's like, Gary, there is something to that about like the corrupting force of this cosmopolitan lifestyle. But then again, you look here in Alvin, Oklahoma, and is things that are things better? Are people happier, more content? I don't know. Doesn't seem like it.
I don't know.
People are assholes everywhere you go. So,
and people are nice everywhere you go.
Yep.
That
is also true.
All sorts of people. Anyway, Don eats another vending machine dinner in his motel room when TV breaks, and he goes to the office to ask for a new one, where he fixes the typewriter for the proprietor's wife. She tells him about a meeting at the Legion on Saturday, and then gets him a new TV.
So Don starts the episode reading The Godfather.
Yeah.
His TV quits in the middle of an episode. Is this Wiener giving a wink to his old boss in Sopranos?
Sure. I like that.
I think so.
I didn't even think about it, but yeah, why not?
That seems a little homage-y.
Yeah, so the TV show also places us in a rough date here. I don't know the exact day in which it aired, but that that show that's on TV is Red Fox's appearance on the Flip Wilson show, and it happened in October 1970.
Okay.
So
That makes sense because
yeah, we're somewhere late fall.
Because Don and his daughter Sally were having a conversation about, is it cold there yet?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's October-y type of weather.
Yep. And we know obviously that Don has had a ton of experience with typewriters, and I guess he's pretty handy.
Yeah, I mean that one time
general.
where he just emasculated Pete. They're at the party and the faucet's all broke and Don just whips off his shirt, goes down to the wife beater and goes to work with Pete's tools and has it fixed like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been shown. That's one of his defining characteristics. He's good with his hands.
Sure. You know, he probably got that.
Growing up at a whorehouse, fixing that toaster.
His dad's not fixing shit.
You're going to get electrocuted or you're going to fix the toaster.
Or his uncle, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's his uncle.
He's not fixing shit. Anyway, Pete's eating pie in Trudy's kitchen. She comes in, turns the light off, and then he says, "Hey, I'm eating here." He invites her to dinner with Lear, but she says no, and then rebukes him for having a rose-colored view of the past.
Sure.
And then he leaves.
Trudy's not a fool.
I desperately want to know what happened to the other pie. Her friend took it, right?
She said you don't want to know what happened to it.
I do want to know. Now that you've said that, I do want to know.
Didn't he say something about? I thought this was all set up of that Pete's daughter baked him this pie, or maybe helped with the baking of the pie.
Oh, really?
Because it's something like, don't forget your pie. What's his daughter's name?
And she should have come in the middle of the scene and smashed a beer bottle in. Here, take this, fucker.
And I don't know if this is accurate or not, because I didn't, I wasn't as troubled about the missing pie as you, but I think the implication is the first pie was really fucked up. It was it was an abomination. It was an affront to God and man. And moms and apple pies everywhere. Sure.
All of
That's an assault on America. The integrity of the pie. Jesus Christ.
Yep. Anything else you want to talk about here? This rose-colored view of the past.
Well, the fact that, I think in other seasons, Pete would be just fucking a dick. There had been beers put in pies, and he would have taken another cheap shot at Trudy and hurt her. Mm-hmm. And here he's like, even before he has the later epiphanies, he's like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm out of here. Good night. And he leaves.
Do you think that's what contributes to her eventually taking him back at the end?
Well,
because obviously her stance changes, right? From this scene to the end.
It does.
So somewhere along the way, she's realized that he's serious about this.
Yeah, I mean, well, wait till the later scene to kind of more fully develop my thoughts on here. But no, I took it as sign as Pete actually growing. I also like that there's a lot of the, television going off and lights being flipped out metaphor, like at the Sterling office last week, and here, it feels like the lights on Mad Men are metaphorically being turned off.
Do you think that has anything to do with who we'll see in the final episode? Think Don's not going to be in the last episode?
No. If you had a theory that anyone the lights are turned out on will not appear again, I would like that theory.
Peggy Campbell.
Yeah, or anyone seen walking out of a door. Yeah, that. So that would take care of Joan. So that mean Roger, Peggy, Joan, Betty.
She kind of walks off the
Pete,
kitchen here.
Yeah, they're all these are all people that we're not going to see again.
Yeah. I mean, that's mostly what leads me to the idea that maybe Don will be the only character, or potentially Don and his kids.
It would be interesting. Be interesting.
So Sally and her friend come back to her room at school and find Henry there. And he tells Sally about Betty's cancer. And he asks her to persuade Betty to get treatment. And Sally doesn't cry in this scene, but Henry does. In the rare breakdown of Henry.
And that's why I guess I was grasping at some of these concepts when I'm talking about Betty and her character weaknesses being character strengths, because, Sally can't ever be the kid. She is here stuck in a position comforting her stepfather. And you can tell really this weird. Is painful. I thought it was a really interesting choice to have her shrink into herself and cover her ears. Yeah. She physically and articulate, I can't hear you over the buzzing in my ears. I thought that was all great and was very well acted, which is going to remember that later when I say some maybe unkind things about the performance at the end. But I thought this was all really good. Yeah,
I thought it was great to see Henry break down.
Yeah.
Henry is a guy who has been stoic this whole time. And to see him, and you could always tell that Henry cared about Betty, and this is the final manifestation of that, I think. In the ultimate dire circumstance, it's good to see Henry and how much Henry cares.
Sure. No, and that's something we've always wondered about. Like, what is his feelings towards, Betty? But yeah, I mean, seems like he's true blue.
I think so.
Like, he just loves her, and he's always loved her, whether she's got a thyroid problem, she's ballooning up, or whether she's dying of cancer and she's a tragic figure. He just loves her. He loves him some Betty Draper.
He does.
Sorry, Betty Francis.
Don's car is fixed and he's about to leave, but the owners ask him to stay a little bit longer so he can go to this vet meeting and to also fix the Coke machine. What do you make of the Coke machine?
Well, first of all, he's finally getting to work on Coca-Cola. I also thought it was another interesting callback where Pete says before he realized Duck's full of shit, he's just kind of like catching him up on news. And he's like, there's even whispers of Coca-Cola. Literal Jim Hobart just goes around Coca-Cola.
I can't get any work done. It's constant.
I don't know. I mean, this was kind of surreal, him wanting to stay for this benefit. And again, this felt like, hey, this guy's got money. He's got a new caddy. He's staying here, not concerned. Yeah. He's retired. Like, we're going to take him for a bit of a ride.
There's no doubt he invited him to that specifically to get him to donate.
Yeah.
I assume his wife told him that Don was military, right? Like, we don't see that happen, but in the typewriter scene, she asks.
No,
like,
yeah.
You served in the military, right? Did you learn to fix typewriters in the military?
Right, yeah.
Or you learn to type in the military?
Yes.
So I assume she told him.
Do you think it's possible that this Andy kid is somehow in cahoots with these guys? Because he's also working at a Foreign Legion place, too.
That's true. He works at the hotel and...
Yeah. So it's like, I wonder, like, when Don's saying you need to get away from this place or you can't come back, I wonder if it's more like, and there's no way we're going to know this for sure. But what if Andy literally is Don and he's in a situation where he's being raised by this pack of thieves that doesn't, I mean, this is ridiculous. The only reason I'm continuing talking is because it'd be really shitty podcasting. I don't want to make Jim make an edit. But I just had this random thought of, like, maybe this literally is like a Don Draper situation. This is Andy stuck in a whorehouse, miserable, and he needs to get away from these people more than he needs to get away from his life of crime.
He seems like he enjoys it too much, though.
Yeah.
Like, he's in on it. It's not like he's
in a way that Don
kid moping around the whorehouse.
Like Don is like, please don't touch me to these prostitutes. This kid's like, bring on the grift, and let me get my grift on.
Sure. Anyway, so yeah, he agrees to go to that, and we'll see him later there. Henry comes home with Sally, and Betty sees her, and she goes straight to her room without a word. And then Sally sits down at the kitchen table with her brothers in a pretty touching scene. They don't understand what's going on. Sally does, and she's there just being with him. I thought that was nice.
She's smoothly shifting into the mom role, just as she did with Henry before. And, this is, I love how they stay true to Betty's character, because this is kind of a bitch move to immediately see Sally come in and like just shift into Ice Queen mode and glide off. But that's the way she would act, finding out that Sally had gotten an F on a report card. It's the way she acts that's the criticism, is like, it's the nuclear option all the time. Bobby gave your sandwich away, freeze him out. But on this, that's the thing. Like, this is appropriate.
And I felt like she's walking out on Henry here, not on her daughter. Like,
sure,
fucking Henry, I can't believe that you went around me and
she
told my daughter this thing that I wanted to tell her in my own time.
She's got this tough, steely Ice Queen exterior that is going to be useful and helping Sally be strong. But it's the same thing that causes her. She doesn't have the emotional grace to separate, I'm furious at Henry, with my daughter found out I have cancer. There's no sense of balancing those two realities out. She can't do it.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is I love Betty now. Like, I feel very warmly towards her, even though all of her warts were still on display.
Yeah, they've done a marvelous job of turning Betty
around. It's appropriate context. Finding out you have 9 months to live excuses almost anything.
I think so. Don shows up at the Legion, which is actually a fundraiser. And Don donates $40 and gets into the mix. Starts boozing it up and talking with people.
He's very uncomfortable. He's got a Dick Whitman on this trip, and now he's having to embody Donald Draper, and he doesn't like it. He's very reluctant.
Well, okay, so I think there are maybe a couple of reasons then that he's reluctant. I think the other reason being he's in a situation where potentially he could be found out.
Sure. And that's definitely, like you said, tension they played with in the episode. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's scary for him.
Sure.
Then we go to Pete, who is at dinner, but it's not with Lear. It's with his brother. Pete wonders why he's not satisfied with what he has, and he ruins his brother's evening.
Or did he? Did he save his brother's life?
He may have saved his brother from ruining his own evening. Yeah.
I think that's interesting. That's a cool thought experiment. If I'm ever tempted to cheat, have that experiment of like, just pretend that your wife or girlfriend knows. And now does it feel fun?
Yeah.
It's only, and they always do. All right.
They always do.
Yeah, everyone finds that eventually, if you're leading a double life and you're intimate with a person, that will come out. Yeah.
I mean, if anything, it comes out in how you act around them, and like you figure it out, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. His brother seems to be totally okay with it, and we find out a bunch of stuff about their father here in this scene, which we've talked about. So we can go back to the Legion. The people at Don's table are kind of reminiscing about their battles and stuff like that, and they call
everybody's drinking Lone Star because nobody's in anything snooty.
That's right. What's Don drinking? Is Don drinking
whiskey? He's drinking Lone Star.
Wow.
Or Canadian Club.
When in Rome.
What do you call a Canadian Club like Boilermaker in a Lone Star?
Disgusting.
A burning Texan outhouse.
Yes, the Texas outhouse.
The Texan
even when
outhouse
you're in Kansas. But Lone Star. Sure, I got you.
Sure.
So they call over a guy who was in Korea, and they chat for a second, and then a cake with a dancing girl inside is wheeled out, and the show starts. Don's real nervous here while he's talking to this guy from Korea. And then he finds out, he was stationed way after I was. Not gonna figure me out here.
But they did play at that, like, let me see your face. Why are you being so
almost like, I recognize you.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
I knew Don Draper. You're not Don Draper.
It would have been interesting, but also it wouldn't have.
Too much of a coincidence for me.
And I just love the way that Matthew Weiner just paints these pictures, like the kid in the 10-gallon drum, or the 10-gallon hat just drumming, and he's just completely like, God, when can I go home? And the burlesque
he's more
dancer.
Like, God, when can I get out of this town? Is
yeah,
what he is.
Yeah. And you got the burlesque dancer, and like this is just a very specific setting and sense of time and place that he nails. And I feel like Don Draper with this painful, forced, plastered smile on his face. He hates this until at the end when he finds out like how it's good. And then he's smashed with the phone book in the face. It's a really whiplash emotional experience for poor Don.
Seems like it. Yeah. And I guarantee Don has seen better things than what's going on at this place. Like, this is a fucking treat for these guys.
Yeah,
they can't believe it. Their minds are blown.
Yeah.
Don's sitting there like, I lived in New York. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, a burlesque show is different than like a strip show.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, like they're used to, at the Sinking Ship, I used to go to spend a lot of Thursday nights there. It's where, I had a regular drinking group we meet on Thursday nights. Sinking Ship Indianapolis had burlesque shows on Thursday, and it was always an interesting, good time. So I was wondering if there was a little bit of like Don, like, oh, these hicks, they think they're living it up. But also, I think that's just part of the burlesque experience. It's not like a titillation so much as it's just fun for everybody involved.
Sure. It's more like a circus sort of thing.
That's like,
oh, wow,
insulting to the,
there's something
to the
insulting
performer.
about circuses?
I there's too much elephant. And I think that's where you're going. Come on.
Well, she should have hidden her trunk better. That's all I can say.
Now you've really opened up some interesting possibilities.
Yeah.
Like maybe this is actually a drag burlesque show. This is like progressive as fuck now.
There you go. Don's never seen that.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, let's go to Pete's hotel room. Yeah.
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Duck shows up there.
Rent the Pit.
Yeah. He's staying at the Carlisle. Duck shows up, angry that Pete didn't go to the dinner. And he tells Pete that he just got him an amazing deal.
Pete says, "You are drunk and menacing."
So proper from Pete. He's got an amazing deal. He's going to go to Lear and passed the contacts of important people over to McCann. Like he's talked with Jim, but maybe he's talked with Jim.
Who knows what this like the whole. That's the start of my problems are like, what if this is all bullshit?
Yeah.
Like he's got this thing. He's going to move to Wichita, and no, you're not. This is Duck didn't get it. He's just been trying to desperately put something together. Then how does that look to Trudy?
So what's Duck's end game here? I mean, obviously he wants Pete in this position so he can get the commission.
Sure, he's a headhunter.
Now it might have just worked out for him amazingly, where Pete can schmooze all these contacts who are going to be flying in these planes, hand them to McCann, and he'll get a cut of that too.
Yeah,
potentially. If he's actually tricking Pete and there is no real job, he's just lying, trying to lie his way into something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that just literally his end game? If I can lie enough, maybe these pieces will come together. Because I don't feel like there being no job and him lying to Pete about this could possibly pay off. I mean, Pete goes to the guy and he says, "Hey, I hear you got a sweetheart deal for me." And the Lear guy's like, "No, we hired the other guy because you said you weren't interested."
Well, yeah. I mean, again, I don't know enough about the situation and moving parts to know, but I'm saying that like the threat is there and it's on the table and it's real. That there's a little bit of you know, if you're seems like everybody really liked Pete and everybody's really happy at his second chance. But if you're a Pete hater, a dyed in the wool, you're a McDonald, and you're still salty about the guest right 300 years ago. I think there is enough evidence to suggest that this could be a colossal clusterfuck. That there is that Doug has.
Maybe he's just spiteful.
He's lied and negotiated, and he's drunk, and he insulted the guy, and Pete's going to accept a job that no longer exists.
I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
If they come back next week and Pete's still like working at McCann, and we like find out kind of through osmosis that job has just crumbled, like it was never there.
I don't think we will.
I don't think so either, but I think it'd be funny.
But if it warms the cockles of your heart to think of Pete miserable, I think there is enough. I think there's a broad enough canvas to paint that painting.
I think Pete takes Trudy and Tammy, moves to Kansas before he finds out that there is no job there. That's what I hope for Pete.
Sure.
Anyway, I didn't see what Pete was watching here, but ultimately it doesn't matter because the date is already found out.
Yeah.
Through another TV show. It looked like Sidney Poitier was in.
Really?
Yeah, it was in that movie, but I don't know what it was. Anyway, we go back to the Legion, and Floyd tells Don, a story about how he ate a few German soldiers, I think.
I think that's it.
I think he calls it bouncing them. I don't know what bouncing means in military terms, in like the slang of the military.
I know when you bounce a router, you turn it off and turn it back on, so that's not it.
No.
But I think the clear implication is he ate 4 German kids.
I think so. He and his buddies ate a bunch of Germans.
Or they didn't have enough food and rations to feed prisoners, so they made them dig their own graves and then just killed them, murdered them.
Okay.
Which is still a massive Geneva Convention. I mean, that's a war crime.
Yeah.
So,
but kudos to him for doing what you got to do, is what the buddies say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they say the same thing to Don when he tells them the story of how he got home.
And I gasped when he said, "I killed my CO." I'm like, Hershey's Part 2. like, you know, you actually killed your own CO, which is interesting. I thought that was going to be the beyond the pale, but then when he actually told the story and, you know, there was more to it than that, I'm like, okay. And it does feel like, I don't know, he enjoyed this absolution he got from these men.
Yeah, I was going to say, it felt to me like,
because the
him
smile,
admitting it and being, like you said, absolved of his sins.
And the smile he had when he was singing Over There with them was much more genuine than the plastered burlesque dancer smile.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like the evening turned the corner. He just didn't know it was about to turn again.
Yeah. Do you know what song they're singing here?
Over There.
Over There?
Yeah, that's like the famous, I think it started in World War I, where the Yankees, you know, that's like, yeah. Sure. And I think it's a famous World War I Doughboy song that's then been recycled for a lot of foreign wars.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Anyway, Betty goes to talk to Sally about the cancer, and she tells her that she's ready to move on and gives her some sealed instructions to open once she's dead.
Your mom gives you that, you open it right away.
Which is what Sally does.
I do too. Like, is there a person on the planet that would not open that right away?
I don't think so. I mean, it's like telling a kid, like, here's your Christmas present in October.
Sure.
They're going to fucking open it.
If you're going to do that, you need to involve a third party.
Yeah.
Like preferably some
not
kind
to be
of
released upon
preferably some kind of escrow service that you've paid in advance.
Yep.
Because if you give me anything, I'm going to open it up.
Yeah.
Because
seal it in
if it's something
safety
good,
box.
then like if it's something that's going to improve my standing with you, why the hell would I want to put that off until you're dead? And if you're going to be a dick about something, then
I'd rather not be nice to you
I
until
want to
you're
send
dead.
you screaming to hell with a proper rebuke. So yeah, like no, you're not gonna respect her wishes on that.
Sure, no, I'm with you. I wouldn't either. In the middle of the night, the vets come into Don's room and accuse him of stealing the fundraiser money. They hit him with a phone book, and more importantly, they take his car keys until he gets them the money. How'd you like this scene?
I mean, I immediately realized what had happened, that the kid did it and set
Sure.
Don up. So it's fine. It was kind of interesting to see that kind of violence on Mad Men. Yeah. Like it's almost a Breaking Bad level of, and that's the other thing. This old dude, I thought it'd been really cool if Bryan Cranston played that role. The whole time I watched, because he has kind of like that Cranston-y vibe. And then imagine him picking up the phone book and belting Don. Like, I would have killed it for that casting. That would have been so awesome.
Yeah, I could buy Bryan Cranston in just about any role.
But I think especially the Alvin from Oklahoma, or I mean, I know this Alva, Oklahoma soldier. I can't remember the old guy, the German eater.
Yeah.
The guy that noshed on sauerkraut during the war.
Wow.
I can say that because I'm a German American. So fuck off. Boom.
Okay.
I liked it. It felt a little out of place in this world, but Don this is stuff he's done before. Like there's that teenage grifter couple that he fell afoul of that drugged him and then robbed him like 2 seasons ago when he was kind of going through his crazy period.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So every once in a while he gets experience with these kind of like shocking reversals.
Yeah, it felt almost like the mob coming in, and shaking him down.
Right.
To me, that's what I was thinking the whole time.
The Godfather. It's right there, front and center.
Exactly. So Pete shows up at Trudy's house at 4 a.m. Another middle of the night scene here. Tells her the news about the job offer and wants Trudy and Tammy to come with him to Kansas. Somehow this works. His desperate plea for the return to his former life and their marriage and family works on Trudy.
It's what I thought was really interesting as I saw on Reddit, someone made a direct comparison of this with Don's carousel speech. Because Trudy was talking about like, I don't see things with nostalgia or sentiment. And then Pete's like, why can't we get back on? Our lives are only half over. Why can't we have more? Why can't we indulge in nostalgia? Things can be different this time around. We can see the world in rose-colored glasses together. And that Don gave that speech and it was wildly successful in the boardroom, but ultimately it was hollow in relation to what you knew was going on in his life. Whereas, this was Pete's pitch of his life and it ultimately might redeem him. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, I don't think there's any explicit callback to the carousel speech, but I think there is hints of it in the room for sure.
Yeah. I mean, how much he tried to emulate Don. So
also, is Pete telling the truth that, I love you and I've never loved anyone else?
It feels like it.
But he said that almost exact same word to Peggy a few seasons back too.
Yeah, I don't know. He
like
was
you
so
like you understand me and you get me and I love you. Even while he was married to Trudy. So it's like that's one of the evidences that this is Pete having a little bit of mania. The other thing,
Pete has also had a lot of time to think about it,
The other thing that took my breath away is when Pete said, "Tell Tammy her birthday wish came true." I'm like, Jesus Christ, Pete, this better work. Because if you invoke that kind of shit to a kid, you can't come back from that. You tell a
No.
kid their birthday wish came true, and then 6 years later you split up. She's going to
Sure.
hate you, man.
Yeah.
That is, woo. That is verbal napalm you're playing with, man.
Yeah, I'm resistant to the idea that Pete is a completely changed man and this is going to work out, even though he has shown signs of redemption.
Yeah, like I said,
And,
he's
like,
saying all the right things, but you know what is the crucial difference between Pete's speech to Trudy and Don's speech to Diane? Like, you know, this is I've learned that this isn't my first thing. I'm ready for this. Like, again, I'm not saying that because I was genuinely moved by this whole experience, and I think this is certainly the best case outcome for Pete. It's kind of a tragic end for Trudy, but I hope it works out.
Yeah, I think the difference is Don. Like, I can't pin down how well Pete understands himself. I'm trying to figure out if Pete has gone through the same process that Don has gone through, and that has affected him in ways to where he now understands what he's lacking, what he wants. And I don't know that I buy the only real indication I've seen of that was in this episode. And so it's a little bit of a stretch for me to say that having only seen that in this episode, it's an actual true thing that he has changed.
No,
And that he is self-aware enough to understand that now this is the only woman I've loved.
the other thing is there in episode 609, The Better Half, you know, Duck was still a headhunter, and you know, Pete's star had fallen. He was looking around to where he could go from Sterling Cooper, and he said, the best I can do is offer you a head of marketing job in Wichita. And Pete's like, God, is there anywhere in civilization? Now he's gleeful about taking a job in Wichita because it's going to be away from this toilet city. And so, yeah, I think he is definitely changed, and he's not as superficial and shallow, and he's more flexible. But, you know, again, we're hell, I don't know. Maybe they'll get divorced in 20 years from now. Maybe they'll die married and happy. I doubt we see him again. I think this is
okay. Better
and
question,
the ambiguity is also a perfect, like, Pete stayed true to his character. He does nothing here that's a betrayal of his basic character, but we still don't know exactly whether he'll end up happy or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question I was going to ask you. Are you happy with this ending for Pete? This kind of ambiguous ending for Pete?
I love it all because I honestly I think it's the best case scenario for Don Draper. Signs are pointing to some redemption and happiness, but we just don't know. There's also some evidence that shows that he's maybe going to self-destruct again. Peggy, she ran into McCann Erickson as a rock star, but we also know that McCann has set their heart against her, and she's going into a sexist
Joan,
sleaze pit. So it's like that's a triumph for her, but there's also some troubling waters. Joan gets part of her money and bounces out, but what's that going to do to her and Richard's dynamic? Mm-hmm. All of these endings that we've got for the people we care about have been some good, some bad, and a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's the best way you can leave characters like this.
Yeah, so I think that's fitting
because you can tell whatever story you want.
Specifically, you know, a lot of shows feel like, oh, they need this perfect ending. They need a finality to these characters. Whereas Mad Men has always felt to me like more a story about real people.
Yeah,
and unless real people die, they continue to go about their lives.
No.
They make more mistakes. They change. They develop. You know, I don't think I want to see an actual final conclusion to any of these characters.
Right.
Doesn't seem right for the show.
You know, we said last season when Don had the Hershey speech, and then he takes his kids to a house in Pennsylvania, that would have been a hell of a finale for Mad Men.
Yeah. So with this,
that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what you want. You don't want something definitive. I think you want that. A lot of good possibilities in the air, some troubling things, and like you could pretend that there is another season of Mad Men because there always will be in real life.
That's the thing. Yeah. If every episode and every season feels like a finale, you don't need the actual finale to feel like
that. I don't need to know Don's okay. I just need to know that it's possible he could be.
Okay. I'm with you. Don drops some money off at the, oh wait, no.
Oh,
the maid shows up.
Yep.
The maid has more booze. Don confronts him about the stolen money. And he tells him to give the money back and leave town. he also talks about becoming someone else, and it's not what you think it is, because he's done that before.
Once you get off that foot, you can't ever. Forever it will dominate your destiny.
Yeah, pretty much.
Straight up Yodism.
Indeed. And so he gets the money back from the kid. He drops it off at the front desk, gets his keys back, and then the kid's waiting outside for him. Asks if he can get a ride to the bus stop, and Don agrees. Not much to go on there, so we'll move back to Betty as she heads off to school while Sally is reading her instructions. It's kind of a layered scene here. Her instructions are put her in a blue dress, her favorite blue dress, get her lipstick, put that on her,
sure,
and bury her in the family burial plot.
Yep.
And that all equals Sally crying, finally, about her mother. Complex relationship there between Betty and Sally.
Yeah, the direction's kind of weird here because I didn't think she did a great job crying. And I've seen her do this well.
Okay.
So I kind of feel like it might have been a problem with acting in an isolation, that you don't have like a Don or or her mom or Roger or anybody to play off of. But
she's gotten too jaded to cry. She Sheryl Crowed herself.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe she's just cries like John Hamm does on SNL. She's just an ugly, all-out baller.
Maybe this was an homage.
It was that I could believe that too.
Really? You think so?
I could believe that too. Like, really, like, it'd been really funny if there's like an outtake in the scene where she just does the like
be amazing.
Yeah, this John Hamm cracking up off camera. Because I hear everyone's final scenes that like everybody showed up for him.
Yeah,
it's like these big community affairs.
I could imagine,
because they did, like, that's one thing you get from all these cast and crew interviews is how much they love the series and how much they love working together.
Yeah, the best shows usually do. Don and the maid pull up to the bus stop. Don drops him the keys to his car and says, "Don't waste this," as he gets out and waits for the bus.
And we got a genuine smile from Don.
Yeah, a smile looks weird on Don.
Yeah,
I'm not certain I'm comfortable with Don smiling, but I mean, I guess ultimately I like it.
I do too. It's a good look on him.
Don's becoming happier. He's understanding himself better. And what more could you ask for?
What did you think of the Buddy Holly end? Every day, things are getting better.
I mean, I like it. Every day things are getting closer, or whatever he says.
Love you like yours will surely come my way. Is that the self-love? Is that the acceptance of the little boy who was Dick Whitman?
Sure, I could buy that. I could also buy that it's paying lip service to the idea that the series is coming to a close.
And does Don,
every day it's getting closer.
Yeah, there's that too. And that fact that Don, we're talking about him and his uncertain fate. Like, Don didn't need to save that kid. He just needs to have the possibility in the air.
Okay.
Is you feeling I'm laying down there?
Yeah.
Because that kid's going to drive off in his catalog and Don's going to assume everything went as planned.
He's going to hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about that song from Betty's perspective? It's a little more bleak if you look at it as every day everyone's death is getting closer.
Yeah, and there's
maybe sit back and enjoy it.
What do you think of Betty's proclamation to Henry when he's like, "Why are you bothering to go to class?" And she's like, "Why was I ever doing it?"
Good question.
That is interesting, because I remember there's a really long NPR series like 6-7 years ago about this young woman who was like 19 and she had cystic fibrosis, I think. Whatever destroys your lungs with phlegm. And she had just gotten like a heart-lung transplant, and her plan was to graduate college because she's only had like a few years to live. And I'm like, man, why would you fucking waste time going to school when you could travel the world or just do whatever? But
I mean, you can claim equally that any of those things are a waste, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think Betty's getting some sort of fulfillment out of school.
Yeah.
Personally, and that she's not, I mean, giving up on that is just also kind of pointless.
That's true. She's going to stay home, brush her hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
literally just waste the last 9 months you have.
That's an interesting philosophical statement. Why am I doing anything?
Sure. Why not just sit and become a blob and wait to die?
Yeah. I think I'm going to say, anyone asked me to give an account to myself, I'm going to say, why am I doing anything? Why does anyone do anything?
Yeah.
What kind of answer is that?
I'm sure we'll
what
get
kind
it.
of answer is anything?
We'll probably get into that if we ever talk about True Detective. Anyway.
Yeah, Betty, that's what she needs. She needs Russ Cole in her life to talk things over with.
Oh, yeah, that'll help her out. Child psychology might not be enough. All right, that's the end for the episode. Want to get some feedback?
Let's do it.
Okay.
First up, the good doctor, Barry G. Wanted to make sure that you noticed Joan taking a Rolodex that she left with no internet and no corporate email. She just took the most valuable set of records that she could in one small box. Of course, he speculated, like many people did, that it'd make life difficult for those following to reconnect with those people, but that wasn't a problem.
Yeah, doesn't really seem like it.
In fact, you know what? Can you make a note to just edit that out? Because I meant to address that. I did address that in the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what the fuck am I doing here?
I don't know.
Might be a rough feedback, man. I thought some of these changes didn't make the merge.
Oh, boy.
All right. First up, Dan from Manchester. Stop it.
Liar.
I know. I'm a dirty fool. Why do I do anything, Jim? Why do I do anything? Dan from Manchester says, Harry Crane refers to McCann as mission control while Don stares longingly up at a plane in the sky and sees Burt Cooper, who died watching man land on the moon. We then hear Bowie singing us out of the episode, which can only mean Don is now Major Tom. Ground control is calling him back, but he's floating around lost in a most peculiar way.
Sure.
While he was pushing against the window, we felt trapped in the McCann capsule. And as Bowie sings, he is now dared to leave that capsule and enter the wide open space. I like that. Pretty good at tying in of those themes.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's roughly the idea that I got last week. Are you lane pricing up that capsule word?
What did I say?
Capsule?
Did I say capsule?
Twice. Yeah, you did.
That's more of a Sean Connery.
Okay, yeah.
Personally, I give it one chance in three. He continues. I'm
sorry, Betty. You have cancer.
It's aggressive. You have 9 months. Money penny. I think I don't really like the Diana storyline, although I'm sure the wiener will make it pay off. Ultimately, I can only hope that Don will now start looking for peace within himself on his travels rather than Diana, which I presume she's a metaphor anyway.
Seems like
startling insight from Dan a week ago. Does this road trip make the Diana stuff pay off? Because, man, sometimes
I don't feel like it.
Yeah, that was like a couple hours we're not going to get back from our life, but did we need to experience could he just spring this episode on us?
I mean, I don't know if he can. I don't know. I always felt like this last season, and really even the season before, have been about Don being lost. Like, I mean, that's not a revelation that he's had trouble with women and that's a root cause of some of his problems. Like, the Diana stuff didn't feel very necessary to me.
Well, it's just like, Tom and Lorenzo, especially the last few seasons, have kind of been dissatisfied with the show. And I've seen a lot of people beat the drum of, oh my God, nothing's happening. And then you get to these last few episodes and they're amazing.
Yeah.
Is that the equivalent of like stretching before you work out? Like, you don't want to do it. You could skip it, but then you'd pull a muscle and get hurt. Like, is this part of the Mad Men? Like, there's some kind of meditative quality to going through all these diversions and kind of like dead ends and emotionally ambiguous to kind of like get you in the right frame that then the wiener can then weave a spell and hit you in the face with the phone book. Is that what we need?
I suppose there could be. I didn't feel like that though. I felt like this would, like, John Hamm going on a, his version of Roger's LSD vision quest here would have worked without the Diana stuff.
Really?
Because
I was walking out of that meeting
mindset.
with no debt, just heading to California, I don't think would be nearly as powerful as him trying to get where was he going originally? Racine? I kind of think she needed to be the MacGuffin to just make it make sense. And the fact that it was him trying to heal
but
this.
I've had this sentiment the whole time with Don. Like, he's looking, he's searching, he's a wanderer in a way for the last season, full season 7.
There was only one episode this season that I kind of started feeling a little impatient about. Everything else I thought was just good enough. Well, not even just good enough, way above the bar of but again, I'm a famous easy grader when it comes to Mad Men. That first season when we were just giving out grades, it's like 10, take my 10 wiener. That sounds sexual. Maybe we should move on to Christina S. I've been waiting to see how the women's strike for equality in 1970 would be addressed, since it's the backbone, or is a backbone so integral for Shirley, Joan, and Peggy's stories. Hell, even Betty's character with her "I'm not stupid, I speak Italian" and new career path. I think it was very interesting that Joan called attention to the strike and not Peggy, who might have been the obvious second wave feminist spokesperson for the show. Obvious at first, but it makes more sense to center the idea of a strike around Joan the more I think about it. In fact, Gloria Steinem, the leader in this movement, actually published a feminist work after waitressing at the Playboy Club. Also, isn't this where Lane Price's girlfriend worked way back then? Joan was more prone to snap, subjected to literally prostituting herself yet again. Men in the workplace refused to take her on her professional merits, even though she is doing the work. Peggy seems to pass, since she's simply imitating men in a man's world. Both of these women have always hit the same struggle from different ends. I think you guys have touched upon this before, but I find it fascinating. I continue to love the dynamic of these two from a feminist standpoint, both together and apart. They've got this yin and yang thing going on, or yin and yin in the case, as the case may be. At McCann, Jones got her office there with all of her accounts, while Peggy doesn't have an office and receives secretary flowers. Yet they're still landing in the exact same place on the outside. Until, of course, Peggy walks in her first day on the job buzzed with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, shades on, doing her best Don Draper impersonation. In her mind, it's her effort to stop making men feel comfortable, but that's exactly what she's going to do by acting just like them. Of course, we'll see how successful she is, since McCann seems to have other plans for her, except for we probably won't, because it feels like we got the last scene.
We're probably left to infer that.
But what's more interesting to me is the progressive nature of Joan's approach. She's way ahead of her time. Third wave feminism of the 90s that followed the second wave urged women to reclaim their lipstick, their heels, and their cleavage, insisting that you can wear a push-up bra and use your brain at the same time. Anyway, I'm so glad the whole now strike.
What I try to do.
Indeed.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to move on.
Okay.
I'm so glad the whole now strike issue came up in light of these two. As an afterthought, why is it these two didn't actually participate in the strike? Do you think that they perhaps thought they transcended the whole movement, perhaps making it into agency?
I don't know. They're very busy. Maybe the transcendental nature of their jobs has something to do with it as well. They don't feel as invested in it.
Well, that's always been kind of a Mad Men thing. Like, we are concerned with racism, but we approach it in really kind of weird angles. You know, like there's a lot of concern about equal opportunity, but do we really want a black person representing our company? There's a lot of this Madison Avenue keeping up the appearances. Like, our heart's telling us is one thing, but my God, what will the customers think? You know, and I think there's a little bit of that with, you know, because I think you can say that Peggy is fairly progressive as a Catholic schoolgirl can be. But even then, like, her experience with Dawn at the apartment where she just couldn't help herself. I feel like that's maybe Joan and Peggy. They work in advertising. They can't afford to take a stand, because if they're photographed and it gets out in the papers and then their clients are all up in arms, maybe it's that.
Yeah, could be.
Or it could be just busy professional women.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think she's right about Joan probably being more likely to take this stand. You know, I mean, Peggy, say what you want about the actress, whatever. Peggy in this universe is not portrayed as a very attractive person, right? Mm-hmm. She's kind of the opposite of Joan when it comes to that.
Okay.
She, like the emailer says, doesn't have as much of those hurdles to overcome because she's acting and looking less threatening to the men. Whereas Joan is basically the sex bomb who walks in, and whether she wants to or not, based on her body and her looks, is going to get comments. She seems like she would have more invested. You know, she can't blend in as easily. And I'm not saying that blending in is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, even if she wants to, she can't.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see her being more invested in this idea. As to why she doesn't go out, I think she's just not that invested as a rich, busy businesswoman.
I mean, I care passionately about a lot of stuff. I've never been to a protest.
Sure. Yeah. Been to like one rally ever
Really?
for anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I just
Apathy.
part of it.
You don't care that much.
Yeah. I don't know. I just see the way.
Asshole.
I mean, part of it is I just also see the way, like I think protesting meant something in the 60s because it was kind of new, like all the social unrest. Nowadays, it's like, I feel like the institutions of power know how to deal with it.
You don't think you can say anything from a free speech zone? Come on, man.
Well, I'm just like, look at the last time, like the Occupy Wall Street, part of that was the movement itself is kind of like they had internal problems, but the media had this narrative that they played that made them all look like fools and idiots, even the ones that maybe had more substantial things to say.
Sure.
So I feel like that a lot of these protests just fizzle out because they know how to manage them. Yeah, I don't know what I think the next generation of this is like, just organizing. We cut out the middleman. We don't need to we can raise awareness on websites and social media and podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just talking about these issues openly, honestly, is more effective than protesting these days. Or maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel comfortable for lazy and not being and standing for anything.
I think that's it. Yeah.
There you go. Lisa LL, which stands for the listener's love. Okay. I'd like to bring up Shirley and give a big up to her for giving the theme of this episode. Advertising is not a comfortable place for everyone. The Wiener gave a nod to advertising being unfriendly to blacks with Shirley's exit and people with disabilities, with the golf invite to the Avon exec in a wheelchair, but is least comfortable for Joan. I don't know if I can get the idea of poor put upon Joni. Mrs. Holloway played the game until the game played her. From her affair with Roger to career advice on Peggy's first day, I'd make those cute little ankles sing, and men like scarves. To betting Herb the Jaguar creep for a partnership, Joan has always traded sex for power. Of course, McCann's rabid sexism is not fair, but I like that the Wiener chose a sexually complex character like Joan to explore this instead of someone like Peggy, who could fight it with her intelligence and her talent, or Meredith, who's so childlike it'd be easy to empathize with her. I couldn't help but wonder if how Joan got her partnership is a poorly kept secret. I can't imagine Herb not telling the entire tri-state area that he spent the night with SC&P's hot redhead. Given the layers of moral ambiguity surrounding Joan, she might have fared better calling a guy and having him break Dennis and Ferg's legs. I hope this is Christina Hendricks' Emmy reel because she acted the hell out of the episode. I read in one of the recaps that the director and co-writer of this episode are the same team that did The Other Women. Might have heard on this here podcast, Tripel, as I had said that as well. The episode where Joan prostituted herself out. I thought that was an interesting take, that it was, you needed to have Joan kind of rebel against the same patriarchy she spent the first half of this show defending and supporting from her side of the divide.
Okay.
She's a gender traitor, and then she essentially reformed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can buy that. And a lot of time passes in this series, right? 10 years. So
sure,
that gives you a lot of perspective on stuff. And I think Joan is one of those characters who has had plenty of perspective. I mean, I think most characters have now, but Joan in particular, she has a perspective on the way she was, and she's not super happy about it.
Yeah. And I like what she said there is the game. She played the game till the game played her. I mean, Joan did everything correctly. I
mean, my question would be, would she still be playing the game if she hadn't gotten what she wanted out of
That's where I was going. Like, what if her rapist husband turned out to be a nice guy and was a doctor and she got everything that she dreamed of? Yeah. Does she give a shit about the plight? I mean, that's like trite observation that like you don't care about a problem until the problem hits home.
Yeah.
It's like where you see a lot of politicians get religion about gay rights when it turns out that, their daughter's gay or their nephew's gay or, it's different about your thoughts on war if one of your sons or daughters is shipping off. So that's not a condemnation of her at all. It's just the way people are.
Yeah.
Moving on. Sonia D.A. said, I'm getting tired of seeing the women paid off. How many female characters does the Wiener want to destroy for us in the end? Jane, Megan, and now Joan. They all left and took the money. And let's not forget Sylvia, who paid back the favor too. This horrible treatment of women in the workplace is an important factor of these times, and I appreciate seeing it on screen, but why couldn't this story be about the fight? The fight that so many women led, that my own mother led. The majority of women stayed and fought and did not have the luxury of being paid off. I'd have loved to see Joan go to war, but maybe there's hope yet. And how many humiliations must Joan suffer for the way she made partner? We get it. Peggy is righteous and Joan must be punished time and again. That's what the money is for, right? Pretty harsh take on the material. What do you think about that?
I don't know, man. I don't know if this show has that message in it. I think that's why they don't go there, is because it's not what the show's about. The show's about understanding yourself and living your life through Don's eyes.
No,
and it has these tangents and it has these tinges of other topics in it, but I don't think ultimately the show is about female rights or race relations or any of that stuff.
Any more than it was about environmentalism when they showed Betty and Don wrecking a park, you know?
Yeah.
That's a weird, and Mad Men's always kind of been vulnerable to like accusations of being very shallow about those areas, but you're right. It's not about solving racism or toxic masculinity or, you know, distant parenting. It's more about showing it and inviting us all to feel, you know, to just basically have an opinion and feel about it.
Yeah. And I'm fine with the show asking questions that it doesn't care to answer.
Yeah.
I like most of my media that way.
Maybe we're by being a very soft touch on that, maybe that does more to change than a very preachy show. Maybe. I mean, you know, the Daily Show doesn't change anybody's mind, right?
It's
more preaching to the choir.
Yeah. So who knows?
Ben R has some meta Easter eggs for us from the last episode. Said Ferg's impersonation of Don is not just a horrible impersonation of Don Draper, but it's more appropriately a poor impersonation of Richard Nixon, as we pointed out. In season 1, Don identified with Nixon's story as a self-made man who is governor of California. The real Don Draper was also from California. So this might have been a sly poke at Don's backstory.
Yeah.
Also, he said Roger referencing his drink card as one of his personal belongings that was stolen with Matt, which in real life, Matthew Weiner actually took from the studios.
Okay.
So that was kind of, I think, a nice touch too.
Yeah.
So thanks for pointing those out for us, Ben. Mario D said, never in a million years, but how great would it be when Richard said, or you can call a guy that Matt Weiner was engineering a brief cameo of Uncle Junior and young Tony Soprano. Even if they just greeted a confused Ferg as he got out of work one day and took him for a little walk.
Are they in like their teens or something?
It would have to be.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, what's the matter with you? Hey, oh! Yeah. Yeah, you trying to give Joan 50 cents? How much on the dot? 50 cents. Hey! Yeah, I could get behind that. Justin F said, just listening to your Mad Men happy hour and you were wondering how current day McCann Erickson felt about the portrayal of Mad Men. Thought you might enjoy this. He sent a link to the Twitter where they said, hello, Don, welcome to the dark side, with the picture of Darth Vader. So yeah, I think that's the best way you can handle it.
Make a joke.
Make a joke about it, and take it good-naturedly. So you don't, if you overreact and you're defensive, it makes people think, oh Jesus, kind of hellholes McCann nowadays.
Yeah.
Listener Levi wrote in and sent us a sweet picture of a recreation of the Mad Men logo that he made with Legos. I'm going to put that in the show notes if people want to check it out, because I'm a Lego fan and it's pretty cool.
Cool.
Lisa LL came back for a second helping for this current episode. She says, Betty has never been more alive than when she was preparing to face the end of her life. Her acceptance of death has transformed her. My mom died of cancer, and I wish she had had the presence of mind that Betty had when she gave Sally clear instructions for her burial and unconditional love for the future. She said parenthetically, I think I just said I wish my mom were more like Betty.
Well, Betty has changed.
Sure.
Quite a bit.
Sure. And fill out your wills, people. If you got kids or family, it's a good idea.
All right.
I went back and watched the pilot for the 10,000th time, and the scene where Don is flailing in front of the Lucky Strike execs, trying to come up with strategy on the fly, he launches into one of his reveries about what happiness is. Don says happiness is the billboard on the side of the road that screams reassurance that whatever you are doing is okay. You are okay. Thinking back 2 episodes ago when Roger took Don's face in his hands, gave him a big kiss, and said, you are okay. You are okay. I think any ending that Don finds that has a big smile on his face like that one at the end of this episode will be the most satisfying for me. Agreed.
All right.
I don't need to know that Don's okay. I just would
I want
like to
some
know
hope.
that he has the capability of being okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Catherine, I think it's worth noting that it was Mother's Day in 1960 when Betty said in reference to Joan Crawford, to think, one of the great beauties, and there she is, so old. I'd like to just disappear at that point. It makes perfect sense. From the episode Babylon, which was season 1, episode 6. And it was Mother's Day in 2015 when Matthew Weiner ripped my heart out by allowing her wish to come to fruition.
An episode 50 years in the making.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot of this stuff. Also, when Betty found out her father was dying, she said to her, I'm your child. Why can't you keep this to myself? She's very cold with him. But now she's being, there's a lot of echoes and callbacks that, as people point them out to me, I'm just really impressed with how the Wiener is pulling this stuff off, man.
Yeah, no, this team of writers seems to do that frequently, and it works.
T Mills from Minnesota said, who knew we could feel so much pain for a character whose flaws have provided some of the most uncomfortable moments of the last 7 seasons. Betty first bought with a dire prognosis. Oh, geez, I can't pronounce this. Betty's first bout with a dire prognosis came in season 5's Tea Leaves, when Betty goes to the doctor for diet pills and find the troubling growth on her lymph nodes. From there, she confides in her friend that she has had a dream of what her family looked like after her death, and she wondered how they'd do without her. Perhaps a reflective acceptance of this quick exit from Earth is pillowed by the realization that Sally's going to be okay. Her calmly confident composure, spanning from diagnosis through discussion with Sally, shows that Betty has in fact developed and matured. She knows and understands her place in the world, and she's going to embrace it for as long as she has left. She's fought many fights, and she knows how to pick her battles.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I agree with all that.
The dramatic irony of Don's absence during this non-malignant development leaves the audience on the seat of their chairs, wondering how he'll respond to the news of his ex-wife's so certain passing. We assume he's thinking of his time with Betty in Italy as he walks by to Burnett at the pool reading The Woman of Rome. On the heels of last episode's moment, I got to believe Betty's death will crush Don and force him to either embrace his role as a father or flee further from Don Draper into another new life. Knock him dead, Bertie. So how will Don react to this news? Will we get to Don reacting? Or will we stay in this one day where Don gets to be a hobo before he finds out he's now responsible solely for these kids?
Oof. Yeah, will her death crush him? I don't know that I agree that it will crush Don. But I do agree with that choice that he has to make. He has to be a father, or he has to be a grifter and a drifter and a hobo. I kind of don't want to see it. I kind of want this last episode to be about Don discovering himself apart from all the other stuff that he's got going on, which is very little now. He has no job.
I agree. Like, it feels like the date we could end
I'm not gonna
on
be
this
disappointed if they
road
do,
arc. Yeah, but on the other hand, I keep coming back to how much groundwork they've laid with this cancer and Rachel dying of cancer. And
indeed, yeah.
It's going to feel weird not to have him with his kids or interacting with his kids, but that would be a different kind of ending. And I'm not, Don ending happy and hopeful with also dealing with Betty. It seems like there's no way to jam those two things together.
That's what I was thinking.
That's not chocolate and peanut butter. That's not two tastes to go together. So,
and the one that you really want is the hopeful Don.
And you just wonder how the Matthew Weiner is going to pull it off. But if anyone can, it's him.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what he gets up to next episode, but I'm super excited to see it.
Let's moving on to Jen Symes. The latest episode, The Milk and Honey Route, is a reference to the book of the same name, The Milk and Honey Route, a handbook for hobos by Nels Anderson. In it, he writes, the road the real hobo follows is never ending. It's always heading into the sunset of promise, but it never fully keeps its promise. Thus, the road the hobo roams always beckons him on, much as it does the undealt card in a game of stud. Every new bend of the road is disillusioning, but never disappointing, so that once you get the spirit of the hobo, you never reach the stone wall of utter disillusionment. You follow on hopefully from one bend of the road to another until at the end you step off a cliff. Could it be a reference to Don's fate or the Wiener's take on the series as a whole?
Yes.
It comes down to how you interpret stepping off a cliff. Is this a suicide thing with Hawaii, or is this like stepping off a cliff can also be a leap of faith, a life affirming thing?
Yeah, and I mean the relentless, never ending march is kind of what I'm taking out of that and applying to Don. Seems like that has been the path that he's on. And despite, you know, whatever hope there is at the end, it's going to continue. It's not like this is going to be the end of his life, I don't think. So that seems very applicable to Don.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't know what's coming next, but something's coming next and he's going to deal with it. He's going to try and figure out what he wants, even though that may not be possible. You know,
we said something about Breaking Bad, like the final three episodes were kind of a choose your own adventure.
Okay.
Do you want like an awesome feel good ending? Then you stop watching here. Do you want a bleak, dark tea time of the soul? Then you watch this episode. Do you want, depending on what you want, you could pick one of those 3 episodes of finale. I kind of wonder if these last 3 are going to work similarly. Because if you wanted the triumphant, awesome ending, you could stop last episode. If you want like the heartwarming, bittersweet kind of Wonder Years version of Mad Men, you could stop at this episode, which leaves us the what the hell is next week going to be? Because
the suicide
ending. Too much time. There's too much time for them to not have some kind of like long, involved road trip process with Don. But on the other hand, narratively, there's only a day for him to have this carefree hobo existence. Like, would it be satisfied if he does like this one last day where he's a carefree hobo? At the end, he calls in Sally, and we just see him go from smiling to Wonder Years dad face and says, "I'll be right there." Hangs up, fade to black.
God damn it! That turns what would be a satisfying, hopeful ending into a kind of scary one. I mean, personally,
it's weird.
I don't want that. But
they got this blend of too much time and not enough time. There's too much time.
You're assuming that we're not going to jump ahead at all.
You're right. Mad Men never does the next day. It's always like weeks and months. Even when it doesn't seem possible for them to do that, they always do.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're going to go just into the next day here.
Yeah.
Like Don's not I don't think Don's going to be stepping on a bus on that bus stop the next episode. I think some time will have passed. He'll have found out about it, and it'll be a question of how he deals with it.
Yeah.
Potentially. I do want to know who the fuck in the writer's room is sitting around reading the hobo code stuff from the 1930s.
Dude,
how do you dig up?
How are they getting any of this stuff?
It's amazing.
Like, I get it that like the older you get, the more kind of pop culture knowledge you just accumulate. And when you got a writer's room full of well-read, interesting people, but damn,
this is a deep cut, no matter how you slice it.
But the other thing is, this is the Wiener's magnum opus. He has been writing this since before Sopranos. So you can imagine that like he sees something like, I see this guy's a hobo. Oh, there's a book on hobos. I'll read. And he's just filing, sticking Post-it notes and chapters. And
in the off season, like all the writers are just.
But I think it's also a lot of this probably comes direct from Matt Weiner. This has been the story he's wanted to tell for a long, long time. So
indeed.
Dan from Manchester said people always discuss Don's dying because of the opening titles, but I think they suggest something else. We see a man abandoning his suitcase and then falling through his life as it was blown apart before landing relaxed and composed in his chair. He predicts Don will finally find himself in next week's episode, and the last shot will be the same as the end of the titles, which is the opening shot of the pilot. The back of Don's head, happy and relaxed, sat on a chair, possibly surrounded by his kids now that Betty may die before the show ends. What do you think of that? That's a good. A lot of people that I think we talked about this once before, that all these like Don will jump off the roof.
Yeah.
They always forget about the end of the credit sequence, which is after a series of tumultuous events, this man lies, or he ends up right side up, very relaxed and confident.
Yeah, safe and sound. That would be on the nose. I'm not. I don't know if Weiner wants to go there. Like how on the nose do you think this ending is going to be? Would it literally be that shot like the emailer's asking?
There's the start of the pilot. That's an interesting visual bookend.
So instead of him in his office with just his work around,
I don't like
cigarette.
I don't like that just because I can see a million clickbait BuzzFeed articles. You won't believe the amazing coincidence about Mad Men, and it's like, oh Christ,
19 things you didn't know about Mad Men.
Yes. This one little trick that Don Draper uses to sell tobacco.
It's toothpaste.
No, one weird trick.
Yeah, it's toothpaste on a bee sting.
Exactly.
Don't be fooled.
Mike Winter has an interesting take. He quotes Pete and Trudy's back and forth. We'll have a plane to use at your disposal to pick up and go anywhere, anytime we want, like driving to Montauk. He is a huge fan of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And if you haven't seen that movie, you should see it. But it's, essentially about two people that went through a breakup and they get their minds wiped and then they fall back in love with each other. Anyway, he says in the movie, just as the last of Joel's memories of Clementine are being taken from his mind, he hears her say, "Meet me in Montauk." Sometime shortly after his procedure, he goes to Montauk, not really sure why, and meets Clementine again. And they start over again, leading us to believe that they've probably done this a few times and that they are doomed to repeat the same results of an ugly breakup and having the procedure and eventually rekindling. Great movie. Is it possible that this quote-unquote happy ending it seems Pete and Trudy are set up for is a farce, and like driving the Montauk line is proof that they too are doomed in a rinse and repeat style relationship? Is Matthew Weiner referencing Eternal Sunshine? We'll never know, right?
I mean, unless he says, sure. But
you know what? Bill Simmons said something interesting in his podcast. Man. He says, I hate this modern age of television because I hate the postmortems that the producers and the writers engage in, because he likes it. And as a writer and a student of pop culture, it's like, I like that I can assemble a case that fits the narrative and I can have this idea of what happens. And I hate when a creator says, nope, word of God says this. Like, I wish they would just shut up and let the work stand on its own. Kind of agree.
Yeah, I mostly agree with him on that, but I don't think that's the majority of fans. I think those postmortems are popular for a reason.
Sure.
Because people are looking for explanations in what is a sea of pop culture now.
We do like the.
I mean,
we like things being definitive and tied up in neat and bows.
Yeah, and let's take a cross reference of pop culture and the phrase Montauk. There's probably 100,000 mentions of Montauk somewhere in pop culture. Does he mean all of them?
I don't know. Even Rocky had a Montauk.
Oh God,
Daniel S. says, in the penultimate episode of the series, we finally see Don's destiny, not to continue down an alcoholic spiral, not to return to Madison Avenue, certainly not to transform into D.B. Cooper, but rather something far more pedestrian and important, to be father to his two sons. With the impending death of Betty, Don will take custody of his sons, move to somewhere in middle America, give them the childhood he never had as a single, if not celibate, father. His interaction with the hotel employee and thief shows that he is happiest as a father figure. He's allowed, and it also is kind of, he's done the same thing with Glenn, like he let him drive the caddy in that point instead of just taking it outright. But it's not as glamorous or as artistically interesting as other possible endings, but it's satisfying and appropriate end to Don's character arc. What do you think? Don retiring to middle America to raise his sons. I think he said he's not throwing Sally in here because Sally's going to be off to college and she's almost grown.
Yeah.
Right.
What if this might be dark. I don't know. What if he takes? He's apartmentless. He's homeless right now. What if he takes his kids and he moves back into the house that he showed him at the end of last season?
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
That's not potentially scarring for these kids. He grew up in a completely unhappy home, in this literal home.
But if he extreme makeover style, if he uses his bare hands and fixes this up and turns it into a family house again, and uses his millions to like revitalize the neighborhood, that would be cool. I don't think that's what we're getting.
No,
but it would be cool. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
No, it's too pat. I think I think the wiener is going to go something more emotionally ambiguous and bittersweet and hopeful, but
probably
with some dark storm clouds to make you worry too. That's my read. Final email. Sherry. Betty had a cancer scare back in season 5, episode 3, Tea Leaves, when a node is discovered on her thyroid. This was back in 1966, and when she couldn't reach Henry, Betty turned to Don. She was hysterical, already imagining the worst. Don tried to get her to calm down, but she couldn't, and she asked him to reassure her that everything would be okay. Henry resented her reliance on Don and kept them in the dark when they later got the good news that the tumor was benign. This time, when she shares the news with Henry, she doesn't get hysterical, like the woman in the book she was reading last week. She accepts the news, rather, and chooses to live the rest of her life on her own terms. Last time she was scared off the prospect last time she's scared of the prospect her children would be raised by Henry's stern mother or Don's wife, but now she seems comfortable that they will be okay. At least they won't be raised by Megan. Amen. Back in season 5, Betty met a friend who did have cancer, and she asked her what it was like. I wonder if her answer is part of what led Betty to make a decision not to prolong the inevitable, and she quotes, well, it's like when you're out in the ocean alone and you're paddling and you see people on the shore, but they're getting further and further away. And you struggle because it's natural, but then your mind wanders back to everything normal. What am I going to fix for dinner? Did I lock the back door? And then you just get so tired, you just give in and hope you go straight down. Cheerful way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
But Betty has learned, and just going to college, like she had the book on hysteria and she didn't act hysterical. She has gone through some genuine character growth.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't care about her story arc if she hadn't.
And, it would be like, there's a lot of cancer in the show, but it would kind of be a minor miracle if there wasn't. Everyone's smoking and drinking and eating red meat and I don't know, huffing radon. No one knows about radon. Like
eating lead paint.
Yeah. Like it's not just thematically appropriate. It's like biologically inevitable.
Yeah.
So that's all I got. It was quite a lot though. And it's all great takes. Don't freak out if you don't get your email in next week. In fact, take some time because we're going to have a series wrap-up spectacular the week after where we kind of go back and talk about our favorite episodes and, kind of make peace with the fact we're not going to have any more Mad Men in our life. Because I tell you what, before the show started, my cable box somehow had some weird data in it that made it look like that they were going to do back-to-backs.
Yeah.
Episodes 713 and 714. And I'm like, I am not ready. Number one, as a podcaster, I don't know that I've got it in me to do 2 monster Mad Men episodes in a row. Number 2, I'm not emotionally ready to be like, I had another week, God damn it. I had another week. I was going Henry on this stuff. I wanted to pursue other options and how can we? I'm going to call a guy. I'm going to sue this Time Warner company. Turns out it was just fucked up, but it's going to be brutal, man. Like I was bummed out for a couple days after Breaking Bad was over.
Yeah. I miss Breaking Bad desperately. Boardwalk Empire. You were not happy to see that one go.
I wasn't, but I don't know. I have a lot of complex emotions about Boardwalk Empire.
All right.
You put me on the spot, goddammit.
Yeah, we're losing a lot of shows lately.
Sure. Justified.
Uh-huh.
I didn't feel bad about Justified. Justified made me just feel kind of like good.
Yeah, Justified seemed like it had played through its course.
But Mad Men, by its nature, it's open-ended and it's about the, like Sally said, it's about the drama and the tragedy. That it's going to feel like there's a little hole missing where some of the other shows that kind of tie up into a bow, I don't think will.
Yeah.
So, okay. But anyway, yeah, Mad Men at baldmove.com. We got our forums at forums.baldmove.com if you want to talk about it over there. If you need some emotional support, I can leave you some last instructions for when the show's over. Thread. Don't visit the thread.
No, they're going
until the minute Mad Men's over.
Nope.
Damn it, Sally. You can also follow our complete release schedule on facebook.com/baldmove and Twitter @baldmove and hell, baldmove.com. Why not throw it in there too?
Do it all, man.
It's the last one. This is the last new Mad Men we're going to get. It's a supersized hour, 15-minute episode. It's the last one.
Savor it.
We'll get through it together. Yeah, and truly savor it.
Eat it slowly.
Like
you would.
I can't do that either.
Steak.
I can't. I
pause it every 5 minutes.
There you go.
Take a 5-minute break.
Every scene, just pause it. Discuss amongst yourselves.
All right, that's what we'll be doing next week.
Pretty much.
Next
3-hour
Tuesday.
podcast next week.
I think so. Yeah. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you then. Until then, I'm Jim.
I'm Aaron. See ya.